right, NFL Week 15 highlights. Believe it or not, Week 15 is already in the books. Here are all the big games that happened this past weekend. Now, remember, the playoff picture has not been sealed just yet, but there are some teams that have clinched their division and a playoff berth. Let's find out who did in Week 15 of the National Football League. We start off on Saturday. The Buffalo Bills, the AFC East leader, and we're trying to clinch it, took on the reeling Denver Broncos. The Broncos are not making the playoffs, but we're hoping to play the spoiler. Buffalo started the game out quick with a 14-0 lead as Josh Allen found Dawson Nix and ran in for the other one. In the second quarter, the Broncos would come back thanks to a fumble that led to a Melvin Gordon touchdown to trim the game to a 7-point contest. The Bills would go into it halftime with an 8-point lead, 21-13 at the break. In the second half, the Bills would dominate. They outscored Denver 28-6. Nothing went right for the Broncos, including a fumble recovered for a scoop and score by Jerry Hughes to make it a huge lead for Buffalo. They would end up winning the game 48-19. Josh Allen threw for 359 yards on 28 of 40 and 2 touchdown passes. Zach Moss rushed for 81 yards on 13 carries. Stephon Diggs had 11 receptions for 147 yards. For Denver, Drew Lock was 20 of 32 for 132 yards, 1 fumble, and 1 touchdown pass. Melvin Gordon had 11 carries for 61 yards and 1 touchdown. The 2019 first-round pick Noah Fant had 8 receptions for 60 yards and 1 score. The recent crowned NFC North champs, the Green Bay Packers, hosted the 4-9 Carolina Panthers. The Packers were hoping to continue their lead in the NFC playoff picture. Before the game, Green Bay held a tiebreaker over the New Orleans for the 1 seed in the NFC. The Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers had only had the number 1 seed in 2012, but were beat by the Giants, who eventually won the Super Bowl. Well, the Packers jumped out to a 21-3 lead thanks to an Aaron Rodgers and an Aaron Jones touchdown. However, the Packers got a little too relaxed in the second half as here comes Carolina. They almost blew a lead. The Panthers would get a rushing touchdown from Teddy Bridgewater on 2 fourth-quarter field goals. The Packers, who led 21-16 at the time, would get an insurance policy field goal for Mason Crosby to go up 24-16. Packers fans could have a sigh of relief as they would hold the Panthers for their 11th win of the season by beating them 24-16. Aaron Rodgers threw for 143 yards and 29 passes and 1 touchdown. Aaron Jones rushed for 145 yards, 1 touchdown. Allen Lazard had 5 receptions for 56 yards. Bridgewater for the Panthers was 21 of 35 for 258 yards and 1 rushing touchdown. He did have a fumble as well. Mike Davis had 14 carries for 59 yards, and DJ Moore had a stellar performance with 131 yards on 6 receptions. Now we get to Sunday action. The Colts had a big game versus the division rival, the Houston Texans. The Colts were in the playoffs at the moment, and the Texans were just trying to finish the season on a good note. Indy would jump out to a 14-0 lead thanks to a touchdown pass from Phillip Rivers and a touchdown from Jonathan Taylor on the ground. The Texans would trim the lead going into the half by 4. Houston did tie the game in the fourth quarter at 20 from a touchdown pass to Deshaun Watson. On the very next drive, the Colts would score as Phillip Rivers would find Zach Pascal to go up 27-20. The Texans were driving the next possession, but fumbled on the goal line, and the Colts would recover. Final score, the Colts 27, the Texans 20. For the second time in 3 weeks against the same opponent, the Texans were inside the 1-yard line or inside the goal line and fumbled it, which resulted in a loss. Phillip Rivers was 22 of 28 for 228 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor had 83 yards on 16 carries and 1 score. Watson was 33 of 41 for 373 yards and 2 touchdowns. David Johnson led the way in rushing and receiving for 8 carries for 27 yards, and when receiving 11 catches for 106 yards. Another AFC South team was trying to stay in the playoffs with a great win as they faced the bottom feeders in the Detroit Lions. The game started close as Tennessee had a 24-15 lead at the half, but the Titans would dominate and crush the Lions in the second half. Ryan Tannehill had 5, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 touchdowns in the game as they outscored Detroit 21-9 in the second half. Derek Carr ended another player's career, Alexander Myers, by stiff-arming the crap out of him. Ryan Tannehill was 21 of 27 for 273 yards, 3 touchdown passes, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Derrick Henry continued to dominate with 147 yards on the ground, and maybe he is the offensive player of the year right now. Corey Davis had 4 receptions for 110 yards and 1 touchdown. On the other side, Matt Stafford had another nice game with 252 yards passing and 1 TD. DeAndre Swift had 67 yards on 15 carries, 2 touchdowns. Marvin Jones, had 10 receptions, 112 yards, and 1 touchdown from the air. The Titans are currently still leading the AFC South and have the fourth seed with a 10-4 record. Next week, they have a tough challenge. They go to Green Bay to take on the Packers on Sunday Night Football. If the Packers win, they clinch the number 1 seed. If the Titans win, well, they'll be close to clinching a playoff berth and the AFC South. The Baltimore Ravens took on the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Ravens were gunning for their 3rd straight win. The Ravens are still not in the playoff picture at the moment, despite beating the Browns twice and the Colts. The Jags stood no chance against the Ravens. Baltimore, led by reigning MVP Lamar Jackson, blew out the hopeless Jaguars 40-14. The 2016 Heisman Trophy winner dominated as he threw for 3 touchdown passes and ran for another. The big story of the day was him finding Dez Bryant in the end zone. It was Dez Bryant's first touchdown since 2017, 3 years ago when he played for the Dallas Cowboys. Stats for the game: Jackson was 17 of 22 for 243 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 INT. J.K. Dobbins had 14 carries for 64 yards and 1 touchdown. Marquise Hollywood Brown had 6 receptions for 98 yards. For the losing team, the Jaguars, Gardner Minshew was 22 of 29 for 226 yards and 2 touchdown passes. Josh Robinson had 16 carries for 35 yards, and DJ Chark added 4 catches for 53 yards. Well, one of the biggest and the oldest rivalries in the NFL happened over the weekend. The Vikings and Bears. Both Minnesota and Chicago were 6-7 and still had a shot to make the playoffs. The Vikings and Bears can't win the NFC North, but we're hoping to get the 7th seed in the NFC playoff picture. The Bears controlled the entire game and had a 20-10 lead at the end of the first half. Trubisky was 15 of 21, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. The Bears started the game with a touchdown pass to Darnell Mooney and finished the game with a Carlos Santos 42-yard field goal. David Montgomery had a great game as he rushed for 2 touchdowns, which turned out to be the major difference of the contest. The Bears held out to win 33-27 to stay in the NFC playoff picture. Allen Robinson had 83 yards on 4 catches. Kirk Cousins was 24 of 35 for 271 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 INT. Dalvin Cook had a great game as he rushed for 132 yards, 1 touchdown, and Justin Jefferson, a candidate for Offensive Rookie of the Year, had 8 receptions for 104 yards.